money like that will go towards this, we would certainly appreciate that. So thank you, Sarah, for coming and sharing that. All right, well, let's continue now. This is part 7 of Inseparable. And, I'll just be honest with you. I had several of you praying for me this past week. I really struggled with this message, and I don't know, for probably a host of different reasons. But it has to do with following rules and following regulations. How many of you are rule followers? Raise your hand. Yes. Some of you are raising your hand, and I know that you are. So how many of you see rules as a way that inhibits you from having a good time? There we go. There's the honesty. That's what I'm talking about. Are there instructions or rules, however, that benefit us? Yes. Says the rule followers. I mean, when you're pulling out, one of the things they teach you in learning how to drive, and I'm hoping my 16-year-old son will hear me on this, one of the things they teach you, a rule that benefits you, or actually it's a law that benefits you, is the first thing you do when you get in the car is to what? Buckle your seatbelt. When you pull out of the parking lot out here on crazy 4-lane Cardinal Drive, what do? You floor it. That's coming from one who doesn't like to follow rules. You look to the left, look to the right, and you look again, right? So there are rules and regulations that do benefit us. Not all rules and regulations inhibit us from having fun. And in fact, they actually help us. They help us to enjoy life more. And sometimes rules and regulations can preserve our lives. What about instructions that we find in the Bible? Are there benefits, or are these more or less antiquated rules? Arbitrary rules? Do they really even matter today? Are they obsolete? Today we're going to look at probably the most identifiable set of rules in the Bible, and I'm sure you already know which ones those are. They're called the what? Thank you. Yes, 10 Commandments. So let's turn to Exodus chapter 20. Exodus 20, by this time, if you were not with us last week, by this time the people had already left Egypt, and we looked at last week dealing with detours, when things happen that we don't expect. And so you can listen to last Sunday's message. It's on our website. But basically, they've already been delivered. They were faced with the Red Sea in the front of them, and then Pharaoh's army was pursuing after them, and then God delivers. I would encourage you, if you're going through a difficult time, if you're having a difficult time of answering the question, why does this have to happen? I would certainly encourage you to listen to last Sunday's message. But now all of that has happened. They begin to get settled in a little bit in some type of routine. And then God calls Moses out because he wants to communicate something to Moses. And this is what we read in verse 1 of Exodus 20. Then God gave the people all these instructions. For those of you who do not like to follow rules, your hands are probably becoming a bit sweaty and heart is pounding when you see all these instructions. But here they are. I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol or any kind or an image of any kind, anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the 3rd and 4th generations of those who reject me. But notice this, but I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse his name. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock even, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Honor your father and mother, then you will live a long, full life in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely against your neighbor. You must not covet your neighbor's house. You must not covet your neighbor's wife, male or female, servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. So God delivers his people. He rescues them. And now they are becoming somewhat settled. And we find God giving this set of rules and regulations to his people. Why? What's their purpose? Were they given to the people of Israel so that God could save his people? Were they given so that they could pursue holiness? That by obeying the commandments, they would then be holy? Is that the why they were given? No, not at all. They weren't given the law to be saved. God had already delivered them. God had already saved them. God delivers them before the law was ever given. So that tells us something already about God's love. That tells us something already about God's amazing grace, that he's not waiting on us to perform or to fulfill a certain law or to fulfill certain regulations in order for him to first love us. But the Bible tells us that he already loves us. And so then the response to that is then, okay, in order for a relationship to happen, not only does he love us, but we also have to reciprocate and love him if we want to experience his presence. If we want to abide with him and he abide with us. So why all the rules and regulations? Why all these rules? I mean, there's like 600 plus laws that were given to the people of Israel, and they were commanded and expected to fulfill all of them. Why the rules here? Why the Ten Commandments? Well, it's this. This was the most appropriate way for God's people to follow as it managed the relationship between God and his people. If God's people were to experience God's presence in their lives, then they needed to understand, and if they were going to faithfully represent who God was to the rest of the nations, they needed to understand a little bit about what God's expectations were. They needed to understand God's morals and how to live, their code of ethic and how to live. So what was true for Moses and his people is true for us. And this is our takeaway right here. If we want to experience God's presence, God's people experience God's presence when they obey God's way. God's people experience God's presence when they obey God's way. Now, for some of us, there might be a twist towards the end, so hang tight, pay attention. These commandments were the precursor to God setting up his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. He was using it first to establish his people as the kingdom of priests, the people of Israel, and then from there it would expand. He was in the process of establishing order and justice, beginning with the people of Israel first. But still something greater, as you read from the beginning part of the Bible and as you continue to turn the pages and as you continue to read on, you find this story that God has woven, that God has created, that God has written for his people. You find there's something beginning to develop that he instills in the hearts and in the minds of people that they should be expecting something, that they should be anticipating something or someone great. So something greater had to happen. Something greater had to be given, something greater than the Ten Commandments, and the sacrifices of bulls had to be given. But it would take centuries for things to develop in order that God's timing would be right for God to give another, yet final, revelation of himself for the world to follow and not just for the people of Israel. Now, who am I talking about? Jesus.